Hi everyone, welcome back to Safe Space. As you know from last week or last time from the update that I will be doing these videos or slash podcast solo for now, and hopefully in the future I'll be able to take some guests on. And as you can see, there's a different background. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, you will see that. So I'm gonna try to change things up here and there to see what works best for me and also for these videos moving forward. And for today's topic, I had mentioned it last time in my update that I would be doing a video or a podcast episode on, challenging times and finding hope after going through some hardship. So that is today's topic. So let's just get into it. For today's topic, as I mentioned, it'll be talking about challenging moments. So I wrote some things down so that I can cover all of the tips and tricks that I guess I use for myself in my challenging moments, in hard times, how I get through it, and also how I make myself feel better in those times. So I'll go off of the list. So the first thing that I said here, the first two things kind of go hand in hand together. So the first one is listening to your inner voice, and the second thing is finding clarity within. So I think these go hand in hand because listening to your inner voice is probably one of the hardest things to do because it requires for you to sit with yourself in silence, in solitude, and just really listen to the inner voice that you have, your intuition, I guess you could call it. And it really, really helps you find clarity within. I think I have done this numerous times in my life and still do to this day whenever I am going through a challenging time. And I think it's probably one of the most helpful ways to really listen to yourself, listen to your inner voice, but also listen to where your emotions are, because I feel like sometimes we don't realize that our emotions are pretty much guides for us. Like we may say like we have depression or anxiety and other things that people deal with in their lives. That's not necessarily that they're emotions, but those are things that everyone deals with, I think, at some point in their lives. And in terms of emotions, our emotions are there to help guide us, I think, in my opinion. I also want to say this before I go on. I'm not an expert in any of these things. These are what work for me. And I just want to talk through these tips because I think even going through, challenging times now for myself, these are probably one of the most helpful ones out of all the ones that I see out there that I've also put in practice for myself. Hopefully they will be helpful for other people as well, for anyone watching or listening. So the third thing I would say is feel all your emotions, positive and negative. And that kind of ties into where I said like listening to your inner voice, because that it will tell you what you're feeling. It will tell you based on your emotions where you should move towards or what you should move towards in your life, whether you should move away from the situation that you're in or whether you should push through it and be persistent with it and resilient towards the hardship that you're facing. And feeling all your emotions in some way validates how you're feeling, and instead of, looking outward all the time or looking to other people, looking around for that validation that you want for your emotions, you can turn within and in that solitude, in that listening to your inner voice, you can ultimately, feel your emotions, or at least name your emotions and validate yourself and understand where you are in your process. And I think a lot of us forget, I also wrote this down, that you have to have grace and compassion for yourself first and foremost. I think a lot of us forget that having grace for the growth that you're going through, let me rephrase that. Having grace and compassion for yourself through the hardships that you're going through and for the times that the challenging times that you're facing will ultimately be biggest help I think you can give yourself. I think a lot of times we expect and want grace and compassion from others when we cannot give that to ourselves. And that's not necessarily to say that you should always face challenging moments by yourself, but there will be times in your life where you won't really have a choice, right? Like you won't really have the option to go to other people or have other people understand you. There will be times, even the closest ones to you or your loved ones, your best friends, even your therapist. I feel like I have personally experienced this, still do, that you will not always find help and validation from others, and that's not something you should look at to blame others, but that also these situations are what gonna help. Let me rephrase it again. These are the situations that are gonna help you find your voice within your intuition, and really name what you're feeling, and accept where you are in your journey. And I think for even myself, I a lot of times don't want to face, or just want to mask my emotions, don't want to face what I'm feeling in that moment, and it really just prevents you and prolongs your journey of healing. I personally could say that I am on a journey of healing right now, and I don't think that's something that really just ever goes away. I think everyone at some point, maybe not everyone, but I would say for me, I am always going to be on a journey of healing, and that's not a bad thing, and I think that's a good thing. One thing that I do for myself is make sure you're working towards your goals and have a vision for your future, but don't always be in the mindset of trying to, I guess, fix and mold yourself into a certain shape, right? I think that's something that I'm still trying to learn. That's something that I'm still finding challenging in my life. Continuing where I left off, because I lost track of my thoughts as I mentioned, the next tip that I would give would be, don't avoid making a decision, however big or small. I think when we're facing challenging times, at least for myself, what I do is I run and I like hide, not necessarily like physically run, but like I pull myself into my own shell. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to like talk about what I'm going through, and I just want to feel my emotions, which is totally acceptable, which is totally fine. But there comes a time where you have to get yourself out of there, because I certainly do believe that suffering is a choice at some point. No, there is a saying that goes, I think, I forgot what it was, but it was something along the lines of, like pain isn't a choice, but suffering is, something like that, where it does mention, that, the pain that others make you feel through their actions, through their words, or even your actions to yourself, or sometimes things that are, that happen in your life that you can't even control, right? Those things can bring you pain, and they can cause you immense suffering, but I think there comes a time and a moment where you have to decide for yourself whether you want to keep suffering based on that pain that you felt when you first felt it, right? You have to decide for yourself that you don't want to feel that anymore. And I think I've been through that many times, and I'm not that old, I know that for sure, but I could say that I definitely have been through a few scenarios in my life where I look back and I had to just make a choice to not stay in that headspace anymore. I had to make a choice. Yes, this person made me feel this way, or that person did this, that person said that, but it does come down to what you want for yourself, and sometimes that decision could just be a very small decision where you change a small habit, or something, you take something out of your life, or or you incorporate something new into your life. very small things, or it could be like big things where you decide to go have it and pursue a different career path, or cut family ties, or I don't know, it could be anything. It could be big life changes, moving to a different country, like anything like that, or it could be very small changes. Like I said, choosing to wear black that day, I don't know, like it could be anything. Maybe choosing to drink more water on a daily basis. It seems like such a small habit, but it's what makes our life as a whole, if that makes sense. So, well, the last thing that I said, what I meant by that is the small habits that we follow each day is what makes our life as a whole, meaning it's what creates our life and what creates our future. Hopefully that makes sense. And the last thing I would say that I would give as a tip for those that might be going through challenging times would be stay authentic and vulnerable, even if it's just with yourself. So I think this may not be everyone's ultimate goal, but I think for me, I've mentioned this before on one of our episodes, that staying authentic and vulnerable, not vulnerable, but staying authentic is one of my biggest and most important goals in life. And vulnerability, I think, comes with it because I think I am naturally an open and vulnerable person. And not everyone might see that side of me all the time, but I choose to push myself towards that direction. I think I even lose track of, my authenticity and my vulnerability at times, and how to show that to other people, how to be more vulnerable in my life and how to be more authentic in my journey. But sometimes you don't have to necessarily prove your worth, your authenticity to other people, but it should be more for yourself, right? At the end of the day, not everyone's going to agree with you. Not everyone's going to believe you're being authentic, even when you are sometimes. And as long as, I guess, you know that you're staying authentic and vulnerable with yourself, you will attract more of that into your life, whether that's through your coworkers, whether that's through people that you interact with on a daily basis. You realize that they're being more open, vulnerable, authentic with you. It will come to you in different ways in your life, and I think it's so important to be present and open to those experiences with other people is probably the most important piece of it. And I actually didn't write this down, but I just realized I came up with another tip, being present. A lot of times I think I personally struggle with this, especially recently, being present and being in the moment, even when you're feeling very challenging emotions, very negative emotions, which I think a lot of people struggle with, or struggle dealing with, which I personally do as well. Being present with your own emotions, whether it's positive or negative, is probably the ultimate gift you can give yourself. I have been struggling a lot recently where I feel like super anxious and I want to like calm down, but I have so much going on that it builds up, right? And I can't seem to be in the present moment. So I have been practicing this for myself, and I think a lot of us struggle with this. So I have been also trying to practice mindfulness, right? And for those of you that might be interested in, living a more purposeful and joyful life, there is a book called, this is a Japanese book, I believe, and it's called Ikigai. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And I'm not sure of the author's name, so if you look it up, I think anyone can find it on Google. But it is a great book. I've been listening to the audiobook recently. It might help, for those of you that might be really struggling to find your purpose, really having a lot of challenges in life and facing a lot of hard situations, it might be helpful to either listen to the audiobook. I think there is a free audiobook on YouTube. That's what I've been listening to, so you can go and listen to that as well. Or I think you could just purchase the book if you'd like to read it on paper or through Kindle or anything like that, right? So I would say those are my tips, and to summarize it all up, I would say the first one was listening to your inner voice and finding clarity within. Those two go together, right? Feeling all your emotions, whether it's positive or negative, and not avoiding making decisions, however big or small. And obviously that comes through practice. At least for myself it has, so hopefully that is helpful for you. And the next one was having grace and compassion for yourself. And the last one was staying authentic and vulnerable, even if it's just with yourself. So I'm just going to summarize it all up here. Hopefully these tips were helpful, and I didn't want to share too many personal details from myself, but if that is something that the viewers and the audience would prefer, I can try doing that as well. But I think this was a really good video to summarize and put together all the tips that I have for facing challenging moments and challenging times, and I hope this was somewhat helpful for you. So I wanted to do an official exit for this episode. Hopefully this was helpful. If you want me to talk about more of these tips and go more into detail about these, or if you want me to talk more about my personal experiences and how I face challenging times, challenging moments, or if you want me to go into more detail about each of the tips that I gave, I can certainly do that. For anyone that's watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment if you have any feedback for me. And also for those of you watching on Spotify, thank you for joining in, and thank you for listening and tuning in. And I will see you next time. Bye.